So we're now live, so I'm just going to call the meeting to order, and my apologies about the agenda on Friday. I totally missed that this is the first meeting of 2025, so we do need to do the election of the chair and the vice chair. So I'm just going to look to the committee now for nominations for chair. Sorry, are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, can I just get a mover to close nominations for chair? Councillor Fowler, and a seconder? Mr. McIntosh? And all those in favor that nominations be closed? So that's carried. And Councillor Greenwood Spears, do you accept that nomination as chair? Okay, and then just moving on to the election of the vice chair, nominations for vice chair. And is there a seconder for that? Mr. Haig? And are there any other nominations for vice chair? So seeing none, if I could just get a motion to close nominations. Mr. Haig, and a seconder for that? Mr. Leonard? All those in favor of closing those nominations? So that is carried. And Councillor Vandewaal, do you accept the nomination of vice chair? Okay, so Councillor Greenwood Spears, I will turn the meeting over to you.
I did want to say I just got Leona's name down after a whole year. Now it's over.
Thank you very much for the support and the new role as chair. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee. 10:06. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands, the gathering place of the first people and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous peoples who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. Done the election of officers. We'll go to the adoption of the agenda. Read that, or would you like?
So we just need a mover and a seconder. We don't usually pre-populate those meetings.
Okay. Councillor Jim? Mover, and do we have a seconder? Councillor Fred. Any discussion, any corrections on the minutes? Agenda, sorry. Seeing none? All those in favor? Carried. Closure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none? Now we have the adoption of the minutes.
I'll move.
Minutes of the meeting. Fran moved.
Leona has her hand up to second it.
Okay, and we got two.
Sorry.
Okay. Any discussion or correction of the minutes? No? Okay. So the motion is that the minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting held October the 9th of 2024 be adopted as is. All those in favor? Carried. Deputations and presentations. We have a briefing by Mr. Joe Gallivan, Director of Planning and Economic Development, provided to the Planning and Advisory Committee with the planning briefing. Thank you, Joe.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm just going to go over some of the work that we've been doing since we met last time, just to give you some updates. You can ask me questions at any time through this presentation. And I'm going to see if this works. It's not working. I'm sorry. Thank you, Amy. So just some of the general planning work we've been doing at the county since last September. So CPPS stands for Community Planning Permit System. You may recall that that's a joint effort with all 4 townships. We're managing the project, but the 4 townships have each invested up to $25,000 to do the work. We've had a consultant hired. Mr. Kurliovich of our department is leading this project. And essentially what it is a new planning tool to better protect our waterfront, giving the townships more control over how different changes happen for planning applications. It is really great that it's going to be implemented across the entire region. That's not been done anywhere else in Ontario. We all have important waterfront lands. The work is going to be continuing all of this year. It's similar to a zoning bylaw, but it is not a zoning bylaw. And we're aware as staff that there's a lot of education that's involved, and we'll be certainly focusing on that. So we'll be updating you on that project as it moves forward in 2025. It's definitely a major step forward for waterfront protection across Frontenac. And then communal services. So we are looking now, working with the townships on amending your local official plans for councils and the community to decide where you want this kind of development in your community. So for example, do you want them in all of your villages in the township, or just some of them that are maybe large enough or have certain services like a bank or a medical center? Do you want them in the rural areas of your municipality? And if so, at what scale? Our advice will be that you probably don't want them at a scale that you'll end up with a community larger than a village. Also, do you want them on the waterfront? There's benefits of having them on the waterfront in terms of environmental protection. But again, what type of land uses and what scale? And then the great thing about communal services is it's going to give the Frontenacs an opportunity to have business lands developed. I think that's a major step forward, particularly for the area closer to Kingston, like South Frontenac, to be able to have lands dedicated and developed using communal services for businesses. And the demand we've heard is definitely there. Yes, Councillor Fowler.
Yes, you're talking about the size of a village. What would you consider a size of a village?
It's a good question. It really is local as well. So there's larger villages in south than there are in north. Plevna is not as big as, so that's part of the conversation you want to have. Yes, Mayor Van.
Do you have a number of what makes sense? I mean, I assume you don't want to have something created for 5 houses, but is there a minimum of realistic dollar value, a 20 or a 30, or are you going to put that in like that sort of a number or no?
I don't think there's going to be a minimum number, but again, that's a good question in terms of private sector investment. And the conversations that we've had over the last few years with developers is, I know Mr. McIntosh has talked to some of the larger developers in the Ottawa area, and they have no interest in coming to Frontenac because they build hundreds and hundreds of units. And that's not going to happen in Frontenac. But other developers have said generally their magic number is minimum 20 for them to get a return on investment. So what we're doing right now is, I'll talk about the South Frontenac plan in a minute, but the other townships, we've had first meetings with North and Central. I'll be coming to Frontenac Island soon, asking you to set up a public information session. So we want to talk to the community about what I just said. Where do you want it? How do you want it? We're also having one of the companies that builds these systems come with us to describe what these systems are. I think it'll help the public understand exactly what this stuff is. So the only date we have locked in is for Central Frontenac. That'll be happening on Thursday, May the 8th. We're still working with North Frontenac on getting a date, and then I'll be asking the same question to Frontenac Islands. But it is local decisions. This is not a county-driven exercise. We've done the major project, but it's really up to the communities how you want them to fit in and at what scale and what density.
Okay, could I ask one question? Just because it was brought up at our most recent township meeting with the representative from the communal services, and he made the point that the townships would be, individual members would be liable for any problems with the communal services. And I had understood that that's exactly why we set up a separate entity so that the townships weren't liable. But he was making the point, and he's sitting on one of your committees, that individual counselors are all personally liable at the township level. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, that is not correct. That's one of the benefits of having the utility. So the townships aren't going to assume any liability, nor are individual counselors. The Frontenac Municipal Services Corporation is intending to assume all these systems once they're built. They'll be in a public utility, and that risk will be spread out over the county over time as more development gets built out. So it will not be on the individual townships. Welcome. And then we're working on policies to look at adding additional residential units in communities. South Frontenac has already updated their official plan, but we're working with the other 3 municipalities to move that forward this year. Next, please. And that's just the web page for the community planning permit system project, in case you're interested. That will continue to get updated over the next few months. And I just wanted to keep you aware of that. Next, please. So South Frontenac is working on their new official plan. It's their first update overhaul in 25 years. It's a major update. And Ms. Bolton of our department is taking the lead on this. I'm also helping out, working with township planning staff. They recently did a 4th draft. The plan, there's been a lot of work put into what I just talked about, communal services. So on our own team, we've put in almost 200 hours of work on reviewing this plan. There's been a lot of back and forth. So the 4th draft was delivered to Township Council earlier this month, and they're looking, staff are recommending that council adopt it next month. Should council adopt it, County Council, Frontenac County Council is going to be the final approval authority, like it is for all official plans in Frontenac and official plan amendments. It'll be coming through this committee before it goes to council. So you'll be reviewing it and making a recommendation to County Council. When that happens this year, I don't really have a date right now, but if Township Council adopts it in April, then we'll start to do our final review, and then decide when it's ready to come to you. Sometime this year for sure. Next, please.
I would just recommend everybody read all 178 pages, please.
On that note, do we all get a copy?
Oh, yes, you'll get a copy of it. Oh, yeah. Don't worry about that. Just want to bring to your attention the new logo for the utility, Frontenac Municipal Services. This was just endorsed by the board of directors. And you'll notice it doesn't really show water and sewer pipes, and that's because of the long-term intent. The whole reason Frontenac started this work was about rural sustainability, community building, not about infrastructure. It's about how do we make sure our villages stay strong over the next 50 to 100 years? How do we build good communities with clean water? But this utility is designed in such a way that it could do other community things. And I'll give you an example. In the Muskokas, there's a similar utility called Lakeland Holdings. They started out managing hydroelectric dams and charging utility rates. That's 25 years ago. They're now doing other things. They're installing solar systems and generating revenue for the shareholders of the utility, which are not all Muskoka municipalities, but majority of them. They're also got into laying fiber, internet fiber, in areas of Muskoka where the private sector will not go, but they know there's a community need, so they're putting that fiber in the ground. And just starting this year, they started installing electric vehicle charging stations throughout the Muskokas. And there is a return on investment. Eventually, likely our utility 25 years from now will be getting a good return on investment if this really works out. Last year, when Lakeland Holdings released their shareholder benefits, the largest shareholder, Bracebridge, got a check for more than $250,000 out of the community benefit fund. So it goes right back into the community. Okay, so next, please. Thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit about, I've just finished my tour, as I call it, of the 3 townships that we provide planning services for. So our planning services are based on 100% cost recovery. Based on the hours we put in, we track all our hours by township, by project. All 4 townships signed the planning services agreement. We don't provide the planning services for South. We did once when their planning director resigned and they needed some help, and we came in and helped them. But generally, they're doing their own. They've got a full-fledged planning department. But it is 100% cost recovery. And I'm going to go through some slides that Mayor Greenwood Spears and Councillor Fowler and Mayor Smith have already seen, but I just want to highlight them for you. So the first one is the hours we put in since 2016 in the township. And you can see what happened with COVID. It really took off. We had all kinds of inquiries, and I know that South Frontenac had the same issue. Every planning department had the same issue in Ontario. And it took all of our resources in 2021 and 2022. But it's now starting to trend downward. In fact, our hours are down 20% from 2023. And I expect that it's not going to go back up to those peak periods again. I don't see that happening. Not only less applications potentially or inquiries, but we've put in a lot of efficiencies into the system. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. But we've gone down almost 800 hours since the peak in 2022. And there's some benefit to that. Next, please, Amy. And this just gives you a chart of all the applications we dealt with. And again, you see in 2022, we dealt with 143 applications. In 2021, 2021 was a peak, 174, over 100 of them in Central. So again, last year, 94, the lowest since 2020 when we dealt with 87 planning applications. So again, trending downward. The only thing I caution here is that not all planning applications are the same. Some are straightforward. They take maybe an hour, 2 hours to deal with, especially straightforward severance. Some are very complicated. So for example, last year in North Frontenac, 2 applications we dealt with, both waterfront related, represented more than 20% of our total hours. And one of them is still ongoing. So in that application just walked in the door a couple of years ago, and we didn't know what to expect. And there's been a lot of public interest, which is fair, but it takes up time. So I just wanted to mention that all these numbers aren't exactly the same. Yes, Mayor Vanderwall.
On the easy severance, do you have delegated authority?
Yes.
Okay.
Based on the advice we were given by South Frontenac. And that's the next slide, please. No, good question. So those are our total planning applications last year were just under 194 to be exact. But if you look at consents delegated authority, so what that means is straightforward applications where someone's doing a small lot addition or they're getting a consent that meets all the zoning rules. There's no opposition from the neighbors because they are all still circulated to the public, but you don't have to take them to the Committee of Adjustment. You don't have to have a formal public meeting. It saves a lot of time. So last year, 41 of that total, 44% used delegated authority. And that's another reason our hours came down. And that didn't start to get enacted in all 3 townships until about this time last year. So we see even more time efficiency saving this year. It's made a major difference.
Comment to that. I've noticed that we have a Committee of Adjustment still with 8 members on it, 4 from public, 4 from council, and the agenda is 0 basically anymore. There's about 3 minor variances or 3 something. So we're rethinking probably the delegated.
We tend to deal with just the difficult ones.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, so
Mr.
the freed resources, are they being put to do something else, like
Oh, yeah.
with the drop in
Yes.
and doing
I'm going to
this?
show you, actually, let's go to the next slide, please. It's you're planning. Thank you, Amy. So this is a slide that shows the number of hours we spent doing county work, regional planning work, like communal services, like the community planning permit system. Work that benefits all 4 municipalities. So one of the things we try to do is in a perfect world, over half of our hours are spent on these major projects because they help everybody. When you look at the numbers here on this slide, you can see what happened when the hours went up for the township hours, they went down for county hours. So in 2021, we were down to just over 1,900 because we had to deal with 174 planning applications at the township. But it's since gone up. And in fact, last year, 60% of our total hours were county related, and that's a good thing. Now, it's slightly lower than the year before, the total hours, because Mr. Kurliovich was on paternity leave for 12 weeks. We brought in a summer student, but we don't bill summer student hours, but that's a good thing. And that's questions I get sometimes. Well, why do you need to keep all your planners if you're not doing township work? Because there's lots of other work to do. We're catching up. For example, we're going to start work this year on an update to the regional natural environment work, protecting the environment in Frontenac. County Council gave me budget approval 3 years ago. We weren't able to touch it until now. So we still got a lot of work to do that it's going to help everybody. Next, please.
A quick question
Yes.
that I know that there was several million brought forward and earned for the communal services, and that with only a sliver of it given towards Frontenac County. Is there any way that any of this groundbreaking work and that can be billed back into those millions?
So I'm not directly involved in those discussions with Eastern Ontario Regional Network, and there's another organization called Rural Impact Canada that got $5 million from CMHC on our idea. But I don't know. I know that Mr. Farrell, our CAO, is starting to have conversations. That money, some additional monies, in my opinion, would go a long way to really helping get some of this development on the ground. Even to help to pay the cost for an environmental assessment, which Sharpet Lake, Central Frontenac is going to need to do, and it's going to be $400,000. It would be really nice if some of that money flowed to us, but that's political, and I'm not involved in that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Next, please, Amy. So, back to the county hours. So 60%, of the total hours, about 800 were my hours as the director, and that's not only managing the department, but some economic development. But 400 of those hours were based on communal services. And that's how the commitment we've made to moving this project forward. I expect those numbers to go down because the utility has now hired a chief executive officer, and the major project itself is in place. The utility is in place, so I don't expect my hours to be at that number again. We spent 150 hours on the community planning permit system work. And as I've already mentioned, we put in more than 100 hours last year on the South Frontenac official plan review. That is considered a county project because you are the approval authority. So we're reviewing it from the county council or Frontenac County Council perspective. Next, please. So projects moving forward over the next year, again, as I've already mentioned, that CPPS work will continue all this year. We're looking at being ready to implement it probably early in 2026. The communal services work, I just mentioned the natural heritage study, which is a major overhaul from the first piece we did in 2012. And then I'll be coming to the committee with a work plan to update the county plan starting sometime this year. That'll be coming to you possibly at the next meeting. I don't expect a major overhaul of our county plan. I think the townships like the fact that it is a very high level plan, and it makes it clear that the townships will deal with local planning decisions. So I don't expect a major overhaul, but I'll bring that work plan forward to you and we can have that conversation. Yes.
several years ago, probably about 8 now, South Frontenac wanted to take over delegated authority
yes.
from the county. But that would only be still, and it hasn't come up yet, I'm not saying that. But the county is still gonna be the official, provincial regulatory for official plans and all of that, right? You don't take over, like, I'm not saying I want to either, but South Frontenac doesn't take it all over,
No.
do they?
No.
Okay.
No, the official plans will still be with Frontenac County Council. However, when the South Frontenac plan is in place, the new plan, we would like to have discussions with the township about becoming the approval authority for subdivisions in South Frontenac. If you've got a full planning department, you've got a brand new official plan, it may be, it's may something you want to consider. Just letting you know.
Okay. That doesn't interfere with the responsibilities of upper tier versus lower tier, correct?
No, it doesn't. Prior to 2000, subdivisions in Frontenac County were approved by the ministry. They delegated it to the county in 2000. But we have the ability to delegate to townships if we're asked to do that, and other counties have done so.
The part I liked about the county doing it, it took some of the pressure off of councils for Joe Public to complain against them.
Yeah.
So at an upper level, it was
The county
diluted, let's say. But now I think the rules have changed provincially too, though, where the opposition isn't able to be the same way as it was before. So maybe there is an opportunity to relook at it, I guess. But
Yeah, the rules changed about 4 years ago where plans of subdivision can only be appealed now by the property owner or an agency like a conservation authority or the township. If the county decided to approve a subdivision and the township wasn't happy, they could approve it. That is going to save a lot of time. The one file I dealt with in South Frontenac, the Hardington subdivision for 13 lots, that took 300 hours of my time, and it cost the county for legal and planning services, not planning services, engineering services, over $300,000. And so I think that the township or the province made a wise decision that said, if you let the public review your policy direction for growth and your zoning bylaw, then those are your building blocks. Your plans of subdivision are based on those building blocks, and there shouldn't be another appeal mechanism. And it's going to save a lot of time. Every subdivision in South Frontenac has been appealed. No, Shield Shore, sorry. Yes, that's a win. Sorry. It's, yeah, a lot of appeals, a lot of lawyer fees, so. Next, please, Amy. So for the townships, going forward this year, we are making our effort to work with Central Frontenac Council to move the Charlotte Lake School site forward, to get some decisions made by council and the public on what they exactly want on the property and at what density. So far, we've spent over 300 hours on that project, but we've had a lot of public meetings, a lot of commentary. And I believe there was a report on Tuesday to Central Frontenac Council on a list of permitted uses that were being recommended. So Frontenac official plan review, I've already talked about. Marysville design standards. So this has got nothing to do with the secondary plan, but the fact that the zoning in the village is very out of date and it doesn't reflect what's on the ground, particularly on the main street. And there's a lot of potential for more commercial uses on the main street. If we change the zoning, it'll be easier for that to happen. Again, that'll be a public process with public discussion. And then working forward this year on the amendments to township plans on communal services. Okay, next, please. Just a few things on economic development. So Ms. Miller goes out with Ann Pritchard to visit the businesses across the county, north to south. They plan ahead and they go out and visit the businesses, and it's very much a success story. So you can see the next visit is planned to Howe Island. Is that soon? Next week. Okay, good. Also back in December, there was a special meeting on Wolf Island with the businesses. Debbie could certainly fill in the details for you. She was certainly in attendance with Frontenac Business Services. That's Ann Pritchard's organization. And the Regional Tourism Organization. So you can see what came out of it. 3 business groups were formed. And that's a positive step forward for Wolf Island businesses. So, next, please. So This says Frontenac brand anthem. So Richard has been working with a company on a video. And yes? Okay, sorry. And it's going to be released in April. I haven't seen it. I think they have it here today. If you may, I'm not putting them on the spot, but it's a good highlight video about what Frontenac is. And it's to have our other tourist organizations use it to promote our region. So again, another real, true, positive economic development story.
Will it be loaded straight onto our website so that in a prominent position to introduce people to? Good, thank you.
Yeah, we have a multi-strategy. We're gonna, make our CAO, if he goes and speaks to other people, play it before he even talks. So it'll be subjected to our 2 minutes of showing off Frontenac County before we get into the boring stuff. So that's those kinds of things. We've looked at every kind of screen we can probably get it on over the course of the next year.
Are
We
you,
don't
gonna-
have boring stuff.
are you going to be the lead singer?
And no, respectfully, my tonal range is quite low.
Thank you. Next, please, Amy. So this is, I can't quite read that slide, healthcare in our community operational review. This was in front of county council. Thank you, Richard. This was in front of county council at their last meeting. To say it's a significant piece of work is an understatement. And I would like to give a lot of credit to Debbie Miller, who's been up and down the county with our consultant, Rob Wood, having a lot of conversations with different medical clinics, doctors, the Wolf Island Medical Clinic, talking to everybody. And to paraphrase, if I remember what Debbie said, the goal as they started was hopefully that there would be a couple of silver bullet solutions that they could say, we can do this and this. That is not the case. And I've asked Debbie, what does healthcare really mean? And I think she knows a lot more than I do. It is very, very, very complicated. But we are making steps, and we have the support of the doctors and the clinics, and I think they're really appreciating the efforts that are being made. So Ms. Miller is working on an implementation plan. We'll be back to that. There will be some resources needed. As we've said before in our Department of Economic Development, we are very limited in our hours. Debbie has done an amazing piece of work and put hundreds of hours into this effort, but moving it forward will require other resources, and we'll be talking to you about that. And we'll be talking to County Council about that in the next few months. But again, I want to thank Debbie for all of her hard work on this file. Next, please. And then the Open Farms project, Richard and Debbie are working on. So it continues to evolve. There's a couple links there if you're interested, but it will be held on a weekend this year, September 5th, 6th, and 7th. And that's basically the conversations that we've had with the farmers about what they really want. This is they're kind of directing it. But there is more information, but you see there will be a kickoff event at the farmers market like last year. Is there anything else you wanted to add? No? Okay. And the last slide, please. So back in December, there was a ribbon cutting on the KMP Trail in North. You can see Mayor Lichty there in the background. I think you see Councillor Fowler as well, and I think I see Debbie and Richard. It was a big day. And the last sentence I think is really important. 12 kilometers are left. And I want to thank the work that Richard's done. There's building the trail, and then there's other issues of misinformation or angry residents or not understanding the economic value of the trail until it's built. And Richard has stick handled all that. And I joke sometimes that when we hired Richard and interviewed him, we never mentioned the word trail. But it took up a lot of his time last year because there was a lot of work involved. The maintenance is one thing, but communicating is a major, major component of its success. So we're near the end, a few more years maybe. I don't want to put words in Richard's mouth, but that was a major event at the end of December, and we just want to make sure you're aware of it. And I think that's it. So if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
We've been asking our questions all the way along. Anybody have any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Joe. Lovely briefing. Now we are at reports to the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee. We have a consulting briefing with Alex Stetler, Envision Consultants Limited, and Sonia Bolton, Manager of Community Planning. Will brief the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee on the Environmental Impact Study Guidelines. Are they going to be here today?
We're online. Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to join virtually today. I am joined by Alex Stetler, who is with Envision Consultant. Envision is our natural heritage consultant, both for the county as well as all 4 townships. And he's been kind enough today. He's at a conference, but he stepped away to join us in case there are any questions, particularly some of the more detailed questions, technical questions that I know that I may not be able to field. But I don't have a formal presentation for you. It's going to be very brief. I just wanted the chance to walk through, what an environmental impact study is, and why we've undertaken these guidelines that are before you today, and how we intend on using them. So an environmental impact study, or an EIS, as we refer to it, is done to ensure that a proposed development doesn't negatively impact natural heritage features and areas. And it can also recommend mitigation measures that should be implemented as part of the development where that's appropriate. So an example would be somebody who is proposing a development next to a wetland, and they're not meeting the required setback. They need a minor variance, and as part of that, they need to submit an EIS to support that. So we have a lot of provincial regulations and provincial policies and municipal policies that require us as municipalities to protect natural heritage features and areas. And we know, being Frontenac, we have a lot of natural heritage. Over the last few years, we've seen more and more complex developments. I think that just goes to the point that all of the easy land is developed on already. So you see people who are developing in locations that just before people were tending to avoid. And unfortunately, a couple of years ago, with changes to provincial regulations, we can no longer rely on the conservation authorities with respect to natural heritage review, although they still do review for natural hazards, so things such as flooding and erosion and slope stability. So we in turn, of course, went out collectively as a group, the townships and the county, and hired Envision, and have been working with them for just under 2 years now. They've been a great asset. But we, as staff, had felt that something was missing, particularly when our applicants were required to do an EIS, and we felt that doing guidelines would help with consistency across the county, and it would also be helpful to the property owners. Most property owners, they're not professional developers. Most of them will, like, once in their lifetime have to do a planning application, let alone hire a biologist to do an EIS with them. So the conservation authorities all had their own guidelines. So we wanted something for us, for Frontenac, and about a year ago, County Council gave us that approval. So we approached Envision to assist us with that. And it's been done in partnership with the Township of South Frontenac, because I reached out to the team at Envision. They said they were happy to help, and they said they'd also been having similar conversations with the planning department at the Township of South Frontenac. So it's been a joint venture. We've shared the costs associated with that. So the guidelines provide guidance and checklists. It's not going to be needed for every application, and where it is needed, we can scope it so down to reflect the nature of the project and of the proposal itself. And that is something we would do with Envision's help at the pre-application consultation stage. The intent is at the county level, county staff will be using these guidelines where needed for any applications where the county is the approval authority for. So as Mr. Gallivan had alluded to, those are things like official plan amendments and draft plans of subdivision and condominium. You will note that part of the recommendation for council to eventually consider is to also share this document with the other townships, not just South Frontenac, and encouraging them to also adopt the guidelines for the use with the planning applications that they're the approval authority for, again, in the hopes that we are able to have a consistent approach across the county. Alex, did I do a good job explaining that? Is there anything that you want to add?
100%, you did a great job. I might just add that it offers the county and or the townships a consistent methodology of how they would decide or approve or deny a planning application. So it's open, it's transparent, it's available for everybody to see, public and municipalities. So it's not like there's no more back of the envelope. Everyone has the same playing field. They review the same document, and it provides a consistent and transparent methodology of when decisions are made.
So that is it for us in terms of a presentation, but we're both here and happy to answer any questions that the committee members might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Question, Mike?
Mike.
Yes,
Mike,
Mike.
yeah.
Mike.
Um,
Actually, I got it right.
Sonia and Alex, is this final and is it already published, like for the public to view and read and?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, I mean, the only public sort of presence it has been on the committee's agenda today. So we are looking for endorsement from the committee and then, you know, receipt and approval by county council. And once that happens, then we would formally publish it in a permanent place on the county website.
Okay. Thank you. Fred?
Yes, regarding the impact study, is this predominantly for waterfront or wetlands?
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
It would deal with anything that is deemed a natural heritage feature or a hydrologic feature. So that's under the provincial policy statement, what those features are. So as soon as you're working within proximity to those features, you would be obligated to undertake a study to determine if you have an impact and how close in proximity you are. And then there's guidelines under the provincial policy statement that says when it would trigger an EIS. But typically it's determined regarding things called natural heritage features. And a natural heritage feature is, you know, there's a variety of them, you know, woodlands, wetlands, habitat of endangered species, water courses, lakes. So yes, and then hydraulic features are things, again, wetlands, areas of recharge, seeps, springs, things of that nature. Water courses, lakes, for sure.
Just a comment. You've just described the whole of Frontenac County. So are we not doing a natural heritage plan at some point this year? Or we're looking at ANSIs and all those kinds of things to determine where they are?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we are going to be doing a new natural heritage strategy to help us more clearly define where all of those important features are that we need to protect. Right now, and as in most cases, this is done on a case-by-case basis. And generally, you know, we don't do many of these because where possible, we try and work with applicants to get them to meet the required setbacks. So then that doing these studies is not a requirement of any permissions that they need. But where it is required, this is the mechanism that they need to prove that their development is feasible and that any negative impacts can be mitigated. But you're right, with the new natural heritage strategy, that will provide us with better guidance in terms of where things are that we need to protect. These EIS guidelines are sort of live separate from that, but if there's a need later on to come back and amend these to reflect any work that comes out of the new natural heritage strategy, then that is certainly something we would do.
Okay. Okay, I'm going back to Fred.
Yeah, I'm looking at section B. I don't know if I'm supposed to be there right now, but I'm looking at a fee of $5,200, which is 50% of the total cost. Who looks after that money, or is that money that the applicant would have to pay before they can proceed with their development?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that is not a fee paid by the applicant. So that is the amount that the county paid. That was our portion of having Envision develop these guidelines for us. So it was just over $10,000, and we split the cost of doing this project with South Frontenac Township. So our cost was $5,200. As for what an applicant would pay, again, that would be done on a case-by-case basis. So if we felt there was a need for an EIS, we would reach out to Envision, ask them if, if the full EIS is needed, if they could scope it to be shorter. And through that process, there would be a fee for the review, but then it would be up to the applicant to work with their biologist. So I can't give you an exact fee, but the fee listed in the report is the amount the county paid to develop the guidelines. And that was approved by County Council last February. Stu.
Thank you. Jim?
When I was going through the guidelines, Sonia, I noticed that you have a list of all the things where EIS will be applied, and that includes unevaluated wetlands. Are those documented anywhere or shown anywhere? Like, how is someone supposed to know if they have an unevaluated wetland on their property?
So I think we still work with the conservation authorities on that, but we would turn to Envision for that as well. It's something that I'm hoping that we're able to define and identify through our natural heritage strategy. I do also know that there have been changes recently at the province in terms of how wetlands are classified or identified. So Alex, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that at all.
That is correct. So there is available mapping, as you alluded to, online that provides whether it's a wetland's been classified as a provincially significant wetland or unevaluated wetland. And so there's a base MARE. So that's a starting point that any applicant can look. These are LEO, Land Information Ontario, provides background, so they would see that. And then if they were to do through that background, see if there's a wetland or some proximity, then they would be through consultation and the pre-con with the township or the county to determine if an EIS is required. And then through the EIS, you do a terms of reference. And one of the basic and always required is a vegetation survey. And through vegetation surveys, you determine the community class that are present within the subject property. And that would allow them to determine if there are wetlands present, which could then fall under unevaluated wetlands.
So that's a $4,000 or $5,000 process to determine that we've got an unevaluated wetland. Like, I have a piece of property that has a cattle watering hole that was dug by mechanical means 30 years ago, shows up as a little pond where the cattle are. It shows on those maps as an unevaluated wetland. There's nothing wetland about it. It was a hole dug and filled like it tomorrow. But I have a problem with including unevaluated wetlands unless they're shown on the municipality's official.
I understand your concern, and that's where you would use the proponent's biology ecologist through an EIS to demonstrate that feature, although it was a human-made feature, a parthenogenic feature, it has naturalized over time. However, given that it's not a natural feature on the landscape because it was built, you could use justifications for its removal and or impacts to that feature. That's the mechanism of why you have guidelines and through an EIS is for these these little, nuanced features that are not natural in the form that they've been on the landscape for ever and ever through natural processes, but through, alteration of the landscape has created and resulted in these features. It's similar to like a stormwater management pond that's been, neglected and not cleaned out every 20, 25 years. And now when someone drives by, they think it's a pond. Those features are typically exempt. You just need to do studies because sometimes in rare occasions you would have endangered species moving in, which would then offer a higher level of scrutiny. And unfortunately that would supersede, it being a human-made feature. So yes, I see your concern, but that's the way the policies at a provincial level have been written.
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
continue?
One more? Yeah.
So the provincial policy says that unevaluated wetlands have to be included. Is that what you're telling me, Alex?
They have to be reviewed, and then you have to look at form and function. So whether the proposed development would impact that feature's form and function. So if it was the function of it is really to a watering hole for cattle, and that is the function determined through the studies, then removing that function doesn't seem to be a concern, especially if the development would remove the cattle in the first place. So there is a mechanism. It just says you have to go through the steps.
Okay, one last question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Have any consultants had an opportunity to review this proposal? I know that there's been a lot of problems in the past with different agencies providing different standards. So I'm really happy to see that you're doing these guidelines. I think they're great. I think it might be beneficial if there was some input from consultants that normally do these studies, just to make sure that it's something that they're used to and it follows in general guidelines on what they normally do.
More so than what our planning department is involved with?
Yes, I mean, there's a handful of firms in the area that do these studies on a regular basis. So if they had a chance to review these guidelines, there may be something that they would want to modify or change that falls in line with the normal protocol.
Through
Okay.
you, Madam Chair, I just to provide a response. So having this third party reviewed, because we have hired Envision, they do specialize in natural heritage and EIS guidelines. The budget does not include at this time third party review by other consultants. And knowing how busy they are, I'm not entirely certain they would do it, for free. So if that's something the committee wishes we could do, we could, but it is going to add considerable time and cost to that as well. And I'll turn it over to Alex, because your firm specializes in this, and maybe if you can speak to the development of the guidelines based on what you've seen, because we've talked about, how we pulled from best practices, to prepare these.
Yeah, exactly. So
Before we
go ahead.
need to provide in period, not to hire them to do, just put it out so that opportunity for this gets approved,
So
provide comments. That's all.
if I understand you, you're asking if the draft document we put on our website so that comments could be obtained or some sort of public consultation before it's finally approved one way or the other at the county level?
I'm suggesting, well, if there is
Madam Chair, the audio must have cut out at the end. I didn't hear the last bit about what Mr. McIntosh was saying.
I think what he's looking for is if there's an opportunity for public consultation on the draft document before it's brought before the county for approval. And that would give that opportunity for others that want to give their opinion for free and that on what they see as improvements or challenges or anything else. That's what he seems to be asking.
I have no objection to that. I would just say I'm not sure how much feedback we would get, because certainly I don't think we would get much from the general public. We would have to specifically reach out to a list of different firms, and we can give it to them for their information and give them the opportunity to provide feedback. I'm just, again, knowing how busy consultants are, I'm just not sure what else we would hear from them at this point. But if that is what the committee would like us to do, I'm more than happy to do that.
Ron?
Well, that's what I had wrote here too. The environmental impact, when it's complete and it goes to council, is that the very first meeting is for acceptance, or you're receiving it in principle? And the same thing with the natural heritage one, if you did the two of them and then said there's a public consultation for, I don't care, 20 days, whatever the normal is, that would suffice me if anybody is interested enough to make a comment on it. And if they don't, then I think it would be no problem to accept it.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So there are these EIS guidelines, and then there's the natural heritage strategy. The natural heritage strategy is going to have a very large and very fulsome public engagement component to it, as we would with all policy studies. This document are simply technical guidelines that we as staff would like in place in order to help applicants through the process. If we were to delay the EIS guidelines from being accepted by council, the natural heritage strategy is not going to be a quick policy review. It's going to probably take at least a year. And on behalf of planning staff, we were hoping to have these guidelines in place before the natural heritage strategy, accepting, of course, that if there are things that need to change in these guidelines after the natural heritage strategy is done, then we're more than happy to do that. But these guidelines are based on best practices in the industry currently.
Okay, Ron, you had something else?
Well, to Jim's point though, if the environmental study comes out and somebody didn't realize what they have on their property, no different than when zoning got changed in the official plan to prime ag or whatever it was, and then the farmer goes, hold on, I've never been in that and I want to have a comment on it. That's all I'm saying. If most people aren't going to notice it anyway, unlike Jim, most people aren't going to go through an effort to try to change it because they didn't realize they had it. But if they did realize it, is there an opportunity? That's all I'm asking.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, we're going to be looking at that through the natural heritage strategy. With the EIS guidelines, it's all on a site-by-site basis. So in the case of Mr. McIntosh's example, if he needed to do something on his property, you know, we look at the mapping, we say, oh, is that a pond? Is that a wetland? And he says, no, that's a cattle watering hole. And you know, Alex, no offense, but staff are probably going to do a site visit. And if it's a blank watering hole with a bunch of cows around it, we're probably not going to proceed with the EIS.
Thank you. That's good enough.
Okay, Mike?
Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong. If and when the EIS is triggered for whatever reason, you are going to immediately involve the consultant. This is what I heard you say at the beginning, but now when you gave the example, you said you won't. I just want to be clear. Will always the consultant be involved, and would the cost go to the applicant immediately? How would that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, we generally do a lot of screening ourselves. We have only involved Envision where we are uncertain or we think that there's a strong likelihood there is a need for environmental impact study. And what we do is we reach out to Envision, we ask them whether an EIS is going to be necessary when we're not sure. They'll say yes or no. We will let the applicant know. And then what we do is we get a quote from Envision, both for their work on helping scope the terms of reference for the EIS, as well as what it would cost for Envision to then review it when that study's done. And we give those quotes to the applicant ahead of time so that they can use that as part of their information in making the decision on how they want to move forward. So during the very preliminary time when they're speaking with staff, there are no additional costs to the applicant.
Okay,
Follow-up question. Would the applicant be given the option to hire someone else other than your consultant? Someone reputable or accredited or approved, just in case to get a comparative quote? Would that be acceptable?
So through you, Madam Chair, so to make this clear, so Envision works for us as the county, so they cannot work for the applicant. So the applicant must hire their own biologist to do the work. The quotes that we are giving them are the quotes basically to cover the cost to have Envision help scope the work and prepare the terms of reference and then review it that when it comes in. So in that respect, Alex is like sort of, quasi-staff in that he is reviewing it on behalf of the county. And it's just those costs, because he's not really staff, that are passed on to the applicant. The applicant still has the additional expense of hiring their own biologist to prepare the actual study. And that is the same today, regardless of whether or not we pass these guidelines. That is the current process. The point of having these guidelines is then that this applicant and their consultant are going to save some time because they're going to know exactly what's expected and what's being looked for in terms of when it's going to be reviewed by Alex and his team at Envision.
Thank you. That's very clear now. Thank you.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, I have one, and that is on page 4.
Moving on to the
Sorry.
report now, we just need to.
Okay, what about the recommendations that we have at the front of this? Okay, we'll have a mover and seconder, please, for the planning environmental impact study EIS guidelines final document. Fred is moving it, second. And your name again? Leona is up there, okay. That doesn't help me. Okay, Leona can be second. Okay, good. There we go. Okay, so it's on. Well, this is it. There we go. I'll get your bill. Correct? See, I'm bad with names, but thank you. Okay, so we've got the mover and seconder. Now we can open discussion, Matt. And would like to read the recommendation first, or?
So that is moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Ms. Leishman. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the environmental impact study guidelines as prepared by Envision Consultants Limited, dated December 12th, 2024, in fulfillment of the terms of the project contract, and further that Council direct county staff to use the EIS guidelines where applicable for all planning applications where the county is the approval authority, and further that Council direct county staff to share the EIS guidelines with our partner townships and encourage them to adopt the guidelines for use in applicable planning applications where they are the approval authority in order to ensure a consistent approach for these types of studies across the county.
Okay, now, specific to this report, are there questions? Okay, then I have a question, and as I said, that's on page 4. And it's because at the end of page 3, where it has when environmental impact study is required, it has a list. And then without a heading, it seems to continue on to page 4. I just wanted to be clear because there seemed to be a big gap in between the two. And aside from that, the fish habitat in particular caught my attention because federal approval from Fisheries and Oceans is usually needed for something like that. And it's been a point that I've been concerned about, that the county has always just looked at the land and potentially the wetlands, but the fish habitat actually gets into the nurseries and the fish stock. So I just wanted to get clarity that that is part of where the environmental impact study requirement is continued to, correct?
That would be correct, as fish habitat would be associated with a hydrological feature, so watercourses, wetlands, lakes, and things of that nature. And you are correct. Multiple approvals are typically required when working around fish habitat because of the Federal Fisheries Act. So you have a local approval that under a key hydrologic feature that you're not having any net impact, and as well, then you have to go to the federal agency and receive approval as well for those proposed works as under the Fisheries Act.
Okay, and I believe I saw quite a few places the word shall in this document, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and on that note, when they were given examples of the cow watering hole, and that what came to my mind is the man-made by 180 years canal that bisects Wolf Island. And that rang through my mind whether or not it would be put under the same classification as a watering hole that may have gotten some bulrushes, et cetera, grown up in 30 years, or whether a private marshland area that has fish nurseries at each end would be considered something different.
Okay, so my understanding would be, given that if I think of it like the cow watering hole, that is an isolated feature, not I'm assuming no connectivity to an existing other source of fish habitat. And so that way, if happened to be that a bird brought eggs there and that cow watering hole became fish habitat, it would be treated similar into the way a stormwater management pond is treated. And yes, fish inadvertently get into stormwater management ponds, but it would be considered a form of infrastructure, and as such would not be associated with the Fisheries Act. The canal, yes, is infrastructure, but because it has a direct connection to direct fish habitat, and fish are not inadvertently entering the canal, they are choosing to enter the canal for whatever reasons, migration corridor, suitable habitat, foraging, spawning, things of that nature. It would be addressed under the Fisheries Act. I'm currently working on the Welland Canal right now, and I'm proceeding with Fisheries Act authorizations and approvals for works associated with the Welland Canal. So major infrastructure where it's connected to direct fish habitat would still apply.
Thank you very much.
No
Any
problem.
other questions? Seeing none, we'll have a vote now for support of this, correct?
That's correct. If there's no other comments or
I don't see
no
any other
amendments
hands up.
being made.
Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're on to planning and economic development, environmental impact study. Oh, never mind, we just did that. Sorry, staff briefing. From Richard Allen, Manager of Economic Development, briefed the Planning and Economic Development Advisory on the Eastern Ontario Rail Trail Loop Market Readiness Assessment. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm passing out a map for the record. It's not on the agenda, so we'll get it uploaded or we'll point it at the video camera or something in some way so that folks can see it. It's an updated version of the map that's included in my presentation and in the document. It's just a bit bigger and clearer than what might be on your iPad screens, and so give you a bit more context about the scope of this project and the scope of the loop. So about this time last year, I spoke to this committee about planning to enter into a partnership with Ontario's Highlands and numerous municipalities, including the town of Smith Falls, the County of Lanark, the County of Renfrew, on building out a signature product that we would put for cycle tourism in Eastern Ontario. This is a connection of rail trails that are mostly developed throughout Eastern Ontario. They are 360 kilometers in length, and about 90% of that is all off-road, which is an appealing product for a cycling market where you're traveling through nature in various towns and you don't have to worry about traffic so much. There are also and so and it also makes a lot of use of the rail trails that exist in Frontenac County, including the KMP Trail and the Cataraqui Trail. So if we move to the next slide here, the purpose of the project has been to understand how ready this product is to be able to go to market. So we don't want to spend marketing dollars to attract people to this product before we have it in a place that it could reasonably receive guests from further afield, from national or international destinations who are coming here, don't have any understanding of Ontario or whatever, want to do this adventure and be able to participate on it. So that's what was evaluated. If you go to the next slide, please. This has a strategic alignment with a number of regional and national plans. I want to point out that the federal tourism growth strategy identifies both trails investment and outdoor recreation as key tourism investments that we want to see grow, and that's how we've been able to find partnership and find funding support to dive into these plans is this alignment with the tourism growth strategy. We also have been, as you know, all in on trails for a while here in Frontenac County, and so it's aligned with our management plan and our destination development plan. If we go to the next slide, please. So in May of 2024, Terminus Consulting was hired by the county to evaluate infrastructure, tourism, services, governance, identify the strengths and challenges to make the rail trail loop market ready. So we spent Jane McCullough, who is the lead at Terminus Consulting, spent 2 weeks. She traveled every inch, either by bicycle, e-bike, or in a vehicle of this loop, and evaluated how it and where it might fit in terms of its readiness for market ready. And so you see in the appendix here, it's shortened just to mostly focus on Frontenac County, but it's still almost 100 pages. Her report and her findings in terms of both the loop and what kind of recommendations are expected in Frontenac County. Next slide, please. The trail infrastructure in Frontenac County is in good condition. There's a little star there because there are some parts further north in further north in North Frontenac that haven't been rehabilitated yet and are in maybe a poor to moderate condition, and parts of the Cataraqui Trail that would be considered the same in terms of the infrastructure. But what we have compared to some of the other parts of the loop are dynamic and changing landscapes. Our rail trails move through a variety of different experiences. Our neighbors in Lanark have a little bit flatter, a little less exciting land that they move through. They have more towns to stop in, but our natural landscapes that we travel through and the wetlands that we just spoke about are amazing things to look at while you're on the trail. So that has a huge tourism benefit for us. And then there's potential economic benefits for us through increased visitation and local spending, and potential for new business opportunities as a result of some of the challenges that we'll outline on the next slide. So when we look at this slide in terms of challenges and opportunities, there's limited food and beverage in Frontenac County, limited accommodations, and some infrastructure improvements that needed. So between Chaffee's Locks on the Cataraqui Trail, where it enters Frontenac County and heads towards Sydenham, there's very little to no places to stay that are easily found. There's no camping, there's no Airbnbs, there's very few, and there's no roofed accommodations such as formal B&Bs or hotels. And once you get to Sydenham and Verona, on the KMP Trail, there still are very limited options for overnight accommodations until you reach Charlotte Lake, where we have Provincial Park, B&B, hotel. But then once you start further north again, the number of accommodations dwindles between Charlotte Lake and Calabogie. And the food options, especially between Charlotte Lake and Calabogie, are missing. So there are opportunities here for business development along both accommodations and the food and beverage side of things. But there are also other types of businesses that support these multi-day trips, which include outfitting, so gear rentals, bicycle rentals, trip support, so moving, shuttling people's baggage so they don't have to take it with them while they're cycling from one location to the next as part of their trip, or even shuttling someone's car if they're not doing the whole loop, but they don't want to ride 75 kilometers from between Charlotte Lake and Calabogie and then ride back. They might want to have a car waiting for them in Calabogie when they get there. So these are the types of businesses or services that existing businesses could engage in terms of building out the trail. Next slide, please. So this is I just spoke to some of these accommodations. We really think that this is a major piece that we need to work on in terms of finding and improving accommodations. This slide here, the bottom photograph shows a part of North Frontenac where it gets flooded on a regular basis. Those folks who are familiar with the section of KMP Trail north of Snow Road have maybe been through one of these puddles once or twice. From a cycle tourism standpoint, they're less attractive than it is maybe from a motorized tourism standpoint, where they get to splash some mud around. The trail has gotten lower and lower over years, and it's taken a lot more work for it to dry out, so it needs some rehabilitation work. The other challenge is that the Cataraqui Trail is managed by Cataraqui Conservation, and that's a relatively new, until very recently, Cataraqui Conservation had a friends group that was managing and fundraising for the infrastructure and management of the trail. Their operation budget is slowly growing in terms of covering off their capital deficiencies, but they do need assistance and support from their partners in the local municipalities in order to level up the Cataraqui Trail to the standards that are set by the Ottawa Valley Recreational Trail or the KMP Trail. And so it's something that we'll have to work with our partners on to find ways to improve. And then the other piece from a challenge is we have great wayfinding and signage. We have a great program, but what we don't have is a loop-based wayfinding signage program. And so that's where the gaps are. We need to be able to ensure that if someone's looking to do the loop, that they are able to, on a regular basis, when they reach certain towns and trailheads, understand where they're at on their loop project. Next slide, please. So in terms of our action plan, we're going to move forward by continuing to educate business development and tourism readiness. So looking at encouraging existing businesses or new businesses to look at accommodations. There's actually a few folks who are looking at starting camping and glamping spaces along or near the trail that we're working with. So that's exciting. Hopefully those businesses can take off. We want to continue our rehabilitation efforts as planned north of Snow Road Station, but also as we look at improving helping the Cataraqui Trail get improved so that it's safe and experience for the cyclists that would go on there. And then we need to work on the governance of this loop. So this is a partnership that's been made through an idea and a vision. What we need to do now is formalize how that would work, how the governance of this idea of a loop might be managed. Does it reside with the regional tourism organization and input comes from the trail managers, or does another entity exist, or is there an annual partnership table where the various counties and partners come together to discuss these issues? And so these are things that we'll be working on from an administrative standpoint over the course of this year. And then obviously we'll need to continue to ensure that there's budget and funding in place for upgrades and marketing. One of the great parts about the fact that there's numerous municipalities and regional tourism organizations involved in this partnership is that a few dollars from each of us can go a long way in terms of positioning it, and we can get support from other entities such as Destination Ontario. Next slide, please. So next week, these are our next steps, but next week I'll be participating in a webinar about trail towns hosted by Ontario's Highlands. It's on Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it is going to speak to how businesses and communities can become more trail friendly, come around to the idea of becoming more trail friendly. It's a first step. We'll be doing in-person engagements over the course of the year in towns that have been identified in the Loop document in each of the regions to look at how we might encourage businesses to attract and support cyclists, be aware of the Loop and the work we're doing there, and how they can be further connected to accelerating the rail trail loop. The other piece besides our planned capital work is encouraging and supporting events. So while we might not do an event that involves the whole loop, we can raise the profile of the loop by doing local events on our local sections of these trails. So if we can host events, there's a Sydenham Fall Trail Run that takes place on the Cataraqui Trail. There's the Lakes and Trails Festival also that takes place in Sydenham, but we also have numerous ATV rides that raise the profile of the trails, and we have a 100-kilometer century ride on the KMP Trail that takes place in July. We want to see more events, and it doesn't necessarily have to be recreational events. More ways to creative ways of hosting things and raising the profile. So the co-host of the webinar next week, Amy Camp, some of the things she likes to see is like public art or art shows or markets that are temporary events that take place along the trail, that are community events, and using the trail as a community space, not just as a recreational space. So those are the types of things we want to see at various points around the loop and in Frontenac County as we move forward with the next steps. Next slide, please. So I just spoke about the Trail Town engagement session, and I can forward a link to anybody who's interested in that. We have the other piece that we'll be doing is a business and user survey in 2025 with our summer student, and that'll help us capture more market information about who's on the trail, how much money they're spending while they're on the trail. We'll be able to use that and make a model with our count data to understand what the economic impact is taking place and what types of things folks are looking for to strengthen the experience. So we'll be reaching out both to users and businesses to gather that information over the course of the summer, and we'll be reporting back on the results of that later. I also, my colleagues at the various municipalities in this partnership and I will be taking part in a new, or are hoping to take part in the Ontario East Municipal Conference to speak about this idea, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada to speak about this idea, and we are confirmed for the Economic Developers Council of Ontario in the fall to speak about this idea in Chaffee's Locks. I think that's it for me in terms of my briefing. There's I added some slides about North Frontenac's rehabilitation, so I could take you quickly through there. Joe already spoke about the fact that we did 8 kilometers of trail. Here was a spot where we realigned the trail to make sure it was crossing the Robertsville Road appropriately, and so you can see we used drone photography to ensure that we were working within our boundaries. And next slide, please. This was previous to us doing our upgrades, and if you go to the next slide, you can see that the surface condition is greatly improved and met our standards to allow almost anybody to be able to use the trail regardless of their style of bicycle or ATV or hiking, walking, or assistive device. Next slide, please. We also, because we haven't had a chance to update you, we've got most of the KMP trail on Google Street View now, and that was updated in August of last year. And so if you could want to see what a section looks like, you can just drag the little guy on Street View and see that. We provided an update to the Accessibility Advisory Committee about that. Next slide, please. These are our counts. I haven't got the 2024 numbers yet, so I can't share them yet, but I will be doing that when I share the KMP annual report later this year. And I think that's it for me in slides. Yeah, we go.
I guess I got a couple questions in it. Well, most of them are comments, I guess. I think this here looks fantastic, but unless it's open to ATVs all the way around, which I think would be a fantastic week, you're not going to generate, well, in my opinion, for the Cataraqui Trail. And I think you would be a huge financial boost if the whole thing was open, because that would be a loop that ATVers would just absolutely love to do. I know the Cataraqui Trail is another part of that, but if they're actually looking at getting resources instead of just begging for them, I would buy a permit if that whole trail is open. Am I going to buy a permit to ride once a year into this short part? Probably not. So I think when I look at this map and I saw what's on here, that would be fantastic if it was open to everybody, in my opinion. I mean, I just talked to people who went 1,600 kilometers on their snowmobiles, right? And stopped everywhere, and they go to motels, they eat, they do all of those things. Yes, I know biking in that natural is great. My spouse is not gonna go with me on a bicycle. I'm just telling that right now. But if I took a week and did this trail with an ATV, of course they would. So I'm not gonna support it just for this, the sake of one organization of either biker or walker. I think if you're looking for revenue, I think if you're looking for a lot of those things, this needs to be a loop that would be open for everything. And I think it would be, I would be shocked if it wasn't a huge economy boost. That's just the one. And then I know we're approving all of this. It still all goes to council though, right? Yeah, okay. That's my comment on it. I love the looks of the loop, but it would be perfect if I could take that loop.
Okay, did you want to speak to that?
Madam Chair, yeah, certainly the way we've positioned this product is from a cycling standpoint, and that's partially because of the larger international audiences that the cycling has a different appeal. We can see a more regional or Ontario-wide or Quebec-wide audience when it comes to ATVs, but part of this was like getting Eastern Ontario on a larger map from a marketing standpoint. I don't think that the conversations about expanding access are over on all of those. We know that motorized is part of this, and we've had incredible support from the ATVs and the snowmobile clubs in terms of positioning this even as a cycling product, because they know that they can provide support. Some of the services that I've outlined, some of the ATV clubs are looking at, well, maybe we can move the luggage between some of these locations for the cyclists and work with this. So we're not trying to be exclusionary, but where we're at right now, this is the in terms of what access is available. This is where we're able to build. We also know that there's a sub loop that could be completed that connects from Carleton Place and or Smiths Falls across through Perth and then back across the Tay Havelock Trail to Charlotte Lake, and so that adds a piece of it. It's just not as obvious or clear from a being completely off-road standpoint as this loop.
Just a small comment to that though. If it actually was open, I know you say it appeals to a broader of bicycling. LD Power folks might say, we're going to rent ATVs for the loop and all of those things. So you won't know that either though, unless that's created instead of just focusing on one group.
Richard, I agree with Ron. This is amazing. Question, how many kilometers out of the 360 kilometers are in Frontenac County?
The numbers in the report, but it's something like something close to 50 kilometers of the Cataraqui Trail, and then we have 70 kilometers of KMP Trail.
My main question is related to the community events you mentioned that you'd like to see on that portions of that trail, like art exhibits or stuff like that. Who would approve an event, and how does the application process happen? Would there be someone in charge of organizing these things so that they don't overlap first, and then second, who assumes the liability insurance if anything happens during those events, stuff like that? So is there a clear vision towards this, or this still work in progress?
At the moment, there's not a clear vision or process in terms of establishing that, mostly because there aren't a significant number of events taking place. But as demand for events come up, we'll be learning those lessons and looking at implementing those things. For the moment, right now, we're just asking folks to reach out to myself, and we can make sure that we can put the pieces in place that are required depending on the style of event or whatever. The ATV events and the cycling events, they come with their own insurance, so they typically sign off with us on their insurance, and we work that out in the initial conversation stages to book those events. When we get to a point where there's a volume or capacity issue, we would have to look at spreading those events out further. But at the moment, we haven't encountered that. Those issues. There might be 1 or 2 days a year where it really feels busy on the trail loop, but it's pretty rare.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Ron. The real money is with ATVs. Bicycles are up there too, and it would be great that all of them can use the trail. And I really believe the trail should be a multi-use trail. This whole loop should be. Getting back to the area north of Snow Road, I've been on that a couple of years ago with my car, and some of those holes are pretty deep. I had it almost up to my window one time going through one of those puddles. So there is a lot of work to be done on that section of the trail when you get the ownership and all that sort of thing settled. But also there's going to have to be an ongoing program to look after the beaver problem, because that's where a lot of the flooding is coming from up in that area. So, but anyway, yeah, the idea of having a long section of the loop should be reconsidered as far as ATV use. That's my opinion.
In terms of those comments, I just want to point out that this committee, not 2 years ago, determined not to expand motorized access on the KMP Trail to connect to the Cataraqui Trail. And so that would be a decision that that was then reaffirmed by council. And so if you're thinking that it's something that we should reconsider or go back out to discuss, we would have to have a more fulsome conversation about that, because right now it's the direction from council is that we don't allow that on this section of the trail.
I think that was the direction on council because we were told we have no control over the Cataraqui Trail and that it's not going to be motorized. What do you want council to say? Well, we don't care what Cataraqui Trail says and we're going to make it motorized? No, I don't think that's how it worked, Richard.
Okay. I thank you for this lovely presentation and I think perhaps even reviewing or sending out a link for the foundational documents of why the KMP Trail was started, because it's truly our section of the KMP Trail. This is a lovely loop that will have further governance, et cetera, and that. But the consultation that went on for getting the support initial to the KMP Trail, and that was broad ranging, not just, a few councillors with opinions, and that some of us favor bikes, some favor walkers, some favor ATVs. But if there's going to be a significant change, then the broader consultation, to my mind, is the only fair way to go. And as for the amount of revenue, I'm very pleased to see finally the details of potential businesses along the way. And that's exactly what I look for on the return of investment of the millions that have been spent by the county into this trail. And that, so with that. Oh, Leona has her hand up. I'm sorry. Yes.
Thanks. Just a question, Richard. I'm curious about the business development side of it. Are you planning to offer incentives of any kind or perks to different businesses that do develop, let's say, accommodations or something like that along the trail?
So with our partners, we're in the process of developing an engagement and program that would probably result from shared marketing perks. So if you're participating in the program or meeting certain requirements, you would be marketed as destinations or locations along the loop. And we're also looking at making some policy changes and development to enable small scale accommodations to be created on or along the trail to provide those supports. So financial incentives are harder to come by from the county standpoint, but what we're trying to do is line up the other beneficial programs to make these things happen and reduce the red tape that might get in the way of someone trying to put this in place.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Okay, on that note, would you elaborate for somebody that might want to have a food truck? Could that be set up with much of a trailer fee or something? You're going to bypass the townships, et cetera, How can this work?
Well, yeah, certainly we have to comply with any local bylaws in the townships regarding, food service vehicles. But at some point, we'll be looking at whether or not it's possible to lease out county-owned lands for the purposes of hosting food trucks. We have to do a bit more of a review. A couple of our lands require an environmental assessment not an environmental assessment, but an impact study to understand whether or not we can move forward with those types of things. So we're in the process of exploring all of those ideas in order to make the barrier to entry for those markets lower. And then there would be a public process in place for any interested vendors to secure those positions.
Mike, you had something else?
Yeah. Richard, you mentioned OHTO and RTO9, I believe. Is Ontario by Bike anywhere involved with this, with promoting this, or a partnership with this initiative?
This is, this partnership is pretty wide ranging. So we have, as I said, the multiple municipalities. We also have the township of Rideau Lakes involved now. So they're part of the Cataraqui Trail portion. The two regional tourism organizations are participating, and Ontario's Highlands is leading this. So Ontario's Highlands is investing in branding the loop, getting ready to market the loop, coordinating all of the Trail Towns sessions. All of this is being led from their perspective. Ontario by Bike has been brought in to bring their products and their bicycle-friendly program as part of one of the layers we can add so we don't have to create a whole new Trail Town program. We can probably build something out of the free bicycle-friendly business program and certification program that exists for all the businesses. And then we're also looking to work with BC Hughes, that does the Ride the Highlands program, to support some of the in-person engagements about developing, having our towns and our businesses embrace the trail and the market opportunities associated with it. So, and all of that's being led through the multi-party conversations that we're having every 2 months through. And as I said, OHTO is leading the initiative, and we're supporting it from their standpoint.
Okay, Jim, did you have your hand up first?
Just a quick question. Are the other counties involved in all this as well, Richard? Because I noticed that Renfrew County has spent a lot of money doing improvement to their trail, actually right from Armprior through to Petawawa. It'd be really nice if they did the chunk down to Calabogie, because that's in terrible shape.
I'll advise them. I think a lot of their trail budget moved to the new trail, the new shiny trail, but they are involved. They sit at the table, and what's really interesting, I'm a unique individual in the fact that I manage infrastructure and I do tourism. Most counties have trail guys building trail, managing infrastructure, and then they have tourism, and they don't know what the needs are for each other. And so we're bringing their tourism folks together as part of this project and their infrastructure folks together and saying yes. So as part of the assessment, we did identify that parts that need improvement. Certainly south of Calabogie needs improvement in Renfrew as well. And Lanark, and that's part of why Frontenac, Lanark, and Renfrew are in the process of acquiring that portion of trail from the MVCA so that we can make those improvements.
Okay, now there'd be Ron and then Leona after that.
My last comment is, I think if we've learned anything in the last 3 months, we need to focus on Canadian tourism. So I know you're saying Europeans want a bike. I understand that. Holland's built on a bicycle, all of those things. But we need to also accommodate Canadian tourism because more people are going to stay home.
I think that's a very fair point, and I think that certainly near-term marketing campaigns are going to focus on staycation type trips.
Okay, Leona? I had indication that you had a question.
No, I asked it. Sorry. If my hand didn't come down, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay. Seeing that, we'll move on to the next portion of that then, which is planning of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, Eastern Rail Trail Loop Readiness Assessment Results and Next Steps. And we have recommendations that you'll read out.
So we just need a mover and a seconder before that's read out.
Fred for moving and Jim for seconding. Any discussion? No, okay.
So the resolution is that the County of Frontenac Planning and Economic Development Committee receive the report, and further that the warden and clerk be authorized to enter into a formal partnership with OHTO, relevant municipalities and trail managers to continue and encourage the development of the Eastern Ontario Rail Trail Loop, and further that staff be authorized to participate in the development of a joint strategy, action plan, and governance structure for the Eastern Ontario Rail Trail Loop.
Okay, any further discussion? Questions regarding the governance or anything? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Want a recorded vote?
I just want to say, folks, that I have to leave for another meeting and I'm going to miss the e-scooter and mobility discussion, but I'm sure somebody will fill me in.
Okay,
Thank you.
and that's where we're at now, is e-scooters and e-bikes, mobility scooters, and other forms of micro-mobility on the KMP trail.
I'll just introduce the report real quick. Okay.
Sorry, so we just, to get the report on the floor, we just need to move a mover and a seconder for the motion.
Michael move and seconded by Jim. Okay,
So the resolution is, be it resolved that that should say the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee received the report, and further that staff be directed to make the following amendments to bylaw 2022-033, and those amendments are all there in front of you.
any discussion?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'll just
Yep.
provide a little context to the
Okay.
committee. So as part of our regular our meeting in November 20th, when we started the discussions about whether or not motorized permits would be required on the KMP trail, one of the questions that came up is what constitutes a motorized vehicle in this day and age, where we have a lot of new things with engines or motors driving them. So we did some research and consultation, and some of it is clear and some of it is very unclear, even in the provincial framework. And so we discovered a number of items in addition to e-bikes, which would be the main thing that we were considering, but also e-scooters, mobility scooters. So mobility scooters being sometimes referred to as electric wheelchairs, but they're also separate than electric wheelchairs. Also then we discovered these, I don't know if you've seen them yet, but they're called low-speed vehicles, and they usually contain one person, and they are very small, and they move along the roadways. They're meant for use on roadways, but they are relatively new form of transportation that are speed limited. So we brought these definitions to the Accessibility Advisory Committee earlier this year for discussion from that perspective. They all agreed that these definitions made sense for inclusion in the trail bylaw and for the various limitations to be included. So the recommendation here is that we continue to follow the provincial guidance around e-bikes and treat them like bicycles, and that a mobility scooter continue to be treated as a pedestrian. And that these LSVs, the low-speed vehicles, not be permitted on the trail at this time, as we begin to understand more and more about their capabilities and what they're able to do. And then we also provided a provision around e-kick scooters. Just we don't see a lot of them in Frontenac County, but I'm assuming that we'll start to see some of them grow on the trail. If you have any questions about the recommendations in the report, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Fred and then Jim.
Yeah, I know are you following the provisions of the Highway Traffic Act as what they would say regarding e-bikes and things like that? Because some people have to wear helmets on some of these devices and take other safety precautions too.
Yeah, so the provisions that are laid out in this report were taken from provincial legislation, including the Highway Traffic Act.
Okay, and Jim?
I think this is great, Richard. My wife has an e-bike. We got stopped on the Cataraqui Trail last year and were informed that her bike, because it's motorized, is illegal to use on that trail. So if you could get Cataraqui to include this, I think it's great, and it should be included because there's technically, I guess they were right, but the police didn't see that way, so we didn't get charged. But it's ridiculous to even be stopped and asked, I think.
Thank you. There's personally, we use e-bikes in town to move our kids around, and recent changes to the legislation have said that you can't have anyone on an e-bike under the age of 16, even as a passenger. So it's affected my lifestyle too, but not on the trails.
Okay. Any other questions? I have one then on the low-speed vehicles. Excuse me, I believe their speed limit is usually around 36 kilometers an hour. I see it's 32 to 40 in that, in your report. And my understanding is that because of their speed limit, they aren't allowed on roads that are 60 kilometers or more in that first speed. So they actually are allowed on sidewalks and riding lanes for bikes.
That's not the case, and that's why they're complicated type of mobility right now. So they're in the provincial legislation, and I'm by no means an expert on this, but I'm not sure anyone is. I spoke at length with the city of Kingston about this. They're struggling with these vehicles as well. There are a few folks who live in rural areas who own these vehicles, but they cannot use them on the shoulder of the road. They cannot use them on the road because the road speed limits are higher than they're permitted to be on, and so they would like to be able to use it on the trail to get into town, which they are currently not permitted to do. And so the pilot program that is offered by the province around these outlines sort of how they work, but they are meant to be sort of used in suburban or neighborhood type situations and not for long haul situations. So they're not meant to be used on roads, and they're not meant to be with a speed limit higher than 50 kilometers an hour, and they're not meant to be used as a pedestrian replacement because they're too fast to go on sidewalks. So that's what the mobility scooter that has a speed limit of 12 to 15 kilometers an hour. Those are permitted on sidewalks and treated as pedestrians. They're a different type of vehicle, but they're sold by the same company. So that's where we get confused.
Yeah, so for clarity in that, on the sections of the KMP trail that currently allow for ATVs, these would not be allowed.
Currently, we're recommending that we don't allow these at all until we understand them further.
Okay, and I just happened to see one this morning at a Tim Hortons. They're being sold at the Cataraqui Town Center. So I think that they're probably going to, it just seems odd that we would let ATVs that are to obey a speed limit but have a much faster ability. And this thing certainly doesn't have it.
It's more, from my perspective with the LSV, I'm more concerned about it being able to manage over a washout or inconsistent trail conditions, which on a recreational trail can happen from time to time, and you can expect them to happen. If we're meant to maintain it to the standard of a road, these vehicles would be able to continue to use them. But the way that they're built is not the same as an ATV or side by side, and so their ability to move over water that's sitting on the trail, or a part of the trail that's been washed away that we haven't dealt from a maintenance standpoint, urges me to consider caution in terms of permitting them on the trail.
Yeah, are there any, what about handicap vehicles like motorized wheelchairs and things like that?
So that's what this report defines as a mobility scooter. So it's and so they're considered pedestrians, and so we're going to treat them as pedestrians under our bylaws. So that means they can access the KMP trail anywhere, as long as they fit the definition that's in our bylaw here.
Okay, on that point, the battery and power source for any electric wheelchair is at the back of the wheelchair, and it's very low. It is certainly lower than any that I've seen for the low mobility. So if you're concerned about somebody getting stuck or into water and that, I would be far more concerned with the electric wheelchair getting into trouble before I'd see something that looks like a mini car.
Thank you. It does warrant consideration, but hopefully they're not going too fast and they can see the water or thing coming with the mobility scooter. Typically under from an accessibility standpoint, the Highway Traffic Act and the various accessibility legislation has always treated these as pedestrians, and we don't want to exit ourselves from what expectations are elsewhere. So we want to be aligned with the expectations of how what uses are permitted on other trails and places, and we'll work with our friends on other trails and places to be aligned with us too.
Any further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay. Now we're at staff briefings. Debbie Miller is going to give us a briefing, Community Development Officer, on the Planning Economic Development Advisory Committee for the Business Retreat and Awards. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just thought I'd circle back and provide some information from the Business Retreat and Awards that took place November 5th at RKY Camp in Parham. Sorry. Next slide, please. So this is the group that attended the day. We had a great day. The weather was incredible for November. We were outside in t-shirts, no jackets for most of the day, and you can see some of the panel discussions that took place along the bottom. Next slide, please. So throughout the day, we had a focus on networking, so lots of opportunities for networking throughout the day. We had business tables set up so businesses could sell products, highlight products that they offer, or offer marketing materials for others to take with them. There was 66 attendees from all 4 townships in attendance throughout the day. There was campfire chats throughout the day. Again, we moved to the campfire chat style, really casual environment. 2 years ago with no technology, and we've received really great feedback about that. So it really allows for authentic conversations and deep engagement, and they just continue throughout the networking sessions as well when people are outside or grabbing a coffee or a snack as well. So these were the topics that we talked about. We had an initial conversation around marketing and content development, and then we moved into an experience through storytelling that was Sarah Spruill did a beaver skinning experience that she operates. She operates a traditional trap line in North Frontenac, and she demonstrated one of those experiences. The Wolf Island businesses had a conversation and shared a bit more about operating a business on Wolf Island and some of the challenges and opportunities they have. We had a conversation around the ambassador program and what businesses are looking for from that. And then the business support discussion with the RTOs, the Ministry, Frontenac Business Services, and Invest Kingston, just to share some of what they offer. And then the last conversation that we had was around living local, supporting local, and just another conversation that was had around that. Next slide, please. These are just, again, some additional photos taken throughout the day. The outside, the top one was the beaver skinning that Sarah was doing and talking through the experience throughout the day. It was very, very well received, and lots of great comments. I've had people say, how are you going to top that next year? So we'll see. We'll continue to look for topics and things like that. Next slide, please. So the day wrapped up with the awards that were presented. So this was the third year for the Frontenac County Business Awards. These were the 5 different award recipients. There was 27 nominations across the 5 categories, and they are nominated through a campaign that we ran for about a month and a half. Nominated, and then they're scored based on an anonymous committee scores them, and then they were the recipients. So you can see the photos along the side as well. Next slide, please. And then this was the award. So each year we choose a different artist from across Frontenac County using a different medium as well. And the award is a representation of the artist's interpretation of the Frontenac brand. So again, you can see the trees, the lakes, the water, the rocks in there. So each year we've had a different artist represent that. So again, continuing to work on this year's retreat and awards, but I just wanted to provide a quick update on last year's. I know it feels like a while ago, but it was a really great day and lots of great comments as well. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions, Mike?
Not a question, just a couple of remarks. First, I was involved with this first as an awardee recipient once and as a anonymous judge once. So this was great and attended all of them. I'm just wondering, are you planning on expanding the award categories, or we're sticking to these 5 throughout the years? Will there be more categories added?
You're probably about the 3rd person who's asked me that in about the last 2 weeks. So again, we're in the process right now where we're looking at the awards. So I think we may, whether it's expanding them or adapting them to be a slightly different award, we're definitely reviewing them again. So as we do each year, but again, thank you for the feedback. If you have suggestions on award categories, pass them along and I'm happy to look at them.
Maybe geographical, like per townships, or maybe industry related as well, that could help encourage more involvement.
Great idea. Thank you. Thanks.
Ron?
Just a question. Have you ever had questions of saying, is there anywhere else in Frontenac County it could be held? I know that's a great location. I'm not criticizing it at all. But I'm just wondering if there's any other place that said, hey, how about us, or something like that. That's all.
Thank you for the question. And we are exploring options for locations. It's also trying to make sure we're in a central proximity so people coming from the island, coming from north, coming from each direction are able to access with a similar, like we're never going to have the same amount of time because we're coming from much further away, but also able to offer the same space, the same feel to the event. So it's really, we've talked about different locations and things like that around, but it's also creating that feel where people can wander outside and be around a campfire and have a really casual conversation too. But thank you for the feedback, and we're absolutely considering that.
Well, and it's hard to get a place where if it did rain, you have the perfect in or out. But anyway, just a
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lovely place. It's in line with our branding as well. And a further update for the winner of the Women-Led Business, Kate Slagle, has currently purchased Fargo's General Store on the island too. So she's very ambitious and doing well on that and moving right forward. So April 1st, we'll have a new owner for our general store and liquor store. Thank you very much for that. And now we'll get to the next piece, which is the acceptance of this report. For the Frontenac Core Business Retreat Awards, Planning and Economic Development, we need to get that on the floor. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
So there is no motion with that one. That
There's a
one is just for
recommendation?
information purposes, but I believe that Ms. Miller was looking for committee feedback, which the committee has provided.
There is a recommendation associated with it, right?
No, there's no recommendation. It's just for information, this report. It's just,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
it's just
All
intended.
right. Thank you. All right. So now we're at communications then.
And there were no communications over the month.
Any other business? Ron?
I know it's easy for me to say, but could we have started the meetings earlier? I don't have to drive an hour, I understand that. But I do another job before that, but anyway, it just seems to me like 10 o'clock is, anyway. If the general consensus is leave it at 10, leave it.
Okay.
I like 10.
Any other comments? Well, today there was a lot of questions and a new chair, so we got a lot of questions out of the way. And we hadn't had a meeting, excuse me, because it was canceled in January, so we had work to get done. I have no problem with that, and since it's every other month or so of a meeting and that, getting it done right is more important to me. But for the concept of 10 o'clock and that, is there anyone other than Ron that would like to have a change of time? 10 o'clock generally works for everyone? Okay. Should we have a vote on that? Don't need to. Okay, good. All right, so other business, any other business anybody would like to raise at this point in time? No? Next meeting, the next meeting of the Planning Economic Development Advisory Committee scheduled for Thursday, May 22nd, 10 a.m. at the County Administration Building. And can I have a motion for adjournment? Oh, Mike? May 22nd.
May 22nd, I have a conflict with that. I'm on the OHTO board and we're having a in-person meeting on that time, on that day. So if it's, I will skip this meeting if it's not changeable.
Okay, if that's the only conflict, I think probably the rest of us have it on our calendars, including the staff. So we'll work towards that. Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Ron, all those in favor? Carried. Adjourned at 12:03. Thank you very much.